3 days. No one claimed her at the station, until a little girl said, "That's her. Can you be my mama?" Wyoming Territory, winter of 1889. A town so small it barely had a name, just a station, a saloon, and the wind. The train hissed as it slowed to a halt, its iron belly groaning beneath the weight of snow and time. The platform stretched empty, save for a few bundled figures waiting for letters or whiskey. Claire stepped down in her worn boots, the hem of her faded green dress trailing the slush. The cold met her like a slap. She didn't flinch. She had known colder things. 12 years old when her mother died. That was when the frost first settled in. Her father, once a gentle carpenter, found comfort in the bottle and lost everything else. Debts piled like dirty snow. And when creditors came, men with gold teeth and cold hands, they did not knock. They broke things. "You're young and pretty," one had said, running a finger along her jaw. "You can pay in other ways." But she did not. Instead, she scrubbed floors, milked cows, stitched hems until her fingers bled. Every coin she earned went to silence her father's debts. She never bowed, never begged, never sold herself. And when it was over, when the last creditor spat on the dirt and walked away, she took what little she had and bought a ticket west, a new name, a new man, a new life. She had answered the ad in the back of the church paper. "Honest man, widowed, seeks a kind woman to raise his daughter and share a quiet life." It sounded like peace, like something warmer than she had ever known. But now, 3 days had passed, and no one came. Claire sat on the bench outside the station, arms folded, trying to hold in heat and hope. Her fingers were red, cracked. Her suitcase sat beside her like a gravestone. Snow whispered against the roof, then screamed. It piled on her shoulders, caught in her lashes. The station master had long since gone inside. The others who arrived on that train, they had all been claimed, hugged, led away. Not her. The sky was a color that had no name, gray with sorrow. And still, she sat. "Maybe he changed his mind," she whispered. Her voice didn't carry. "Maybe he saw my photo and thought I was too plain. Maybe he never existed at all." Her heart ached, but her eyes remained dry. Tears had long ago stopped visiting her. A boy passed with a sled, paused, then kept going. He did not ask if she needed help. No one did. Claire looked down at her hands. The gloves were torn at the tips. She had meant to sew them on the train, but her fingers wouldn't stop trembling. Behind her, the train station clock struck 4. The sound echoed through the white silence like a church bell for the forgotten. She blinked slowly. 3 days. 3 days sitting on this bench. 3 days waiting for a man who never showed. 3 nights curled under the awning of the platform, shivering against the wind. The third night was the worst. Her stomach gnawed at itself. Her breath had begun to fog less. That scared her. Still, she stayed. Because there was nowhere else to go. Because standing up meant giving up. Because if she moved, she feared her soul would shatter into snow. She pulled her coat tighter, such as it was, and closed her eyes. The train schedule had become a cruel lullaby, the rhythm of steam and departure. Suddenly, a voice nearby, "You waitin' for someone?" It was the old freight manager, brushing snow from his lantern. He had asked before. Claire didn't look up. She barely moved her lips. "Yes, sir." "Same man as yesterday?" She nodded. He studied her a moment longer, then walked away without another word. She sat in silence, barely breathing. Around her the world blurred into cold. The snow no longer bothered her. Her back ached, her legs burned, but her soul felt nothing. The shame was deeper than pain, deeper than cold. It was a silence so loud it swallowed her. Claire closed her eyes again, for the 100th time, telling herself it was just to rest. Just for a moment. But somewhere, deep inside, a small voice whispered, "No one is coming. He is not real. You are alone." And still, she stayed. If you are still here with Claire, Watching her wait in the cold for a stranger who never came, your heart may already know where this journey is going. If it does, tap the hype button and stay with us. Because the wind may be cruel in the west, but sometimes something warm breaks through. The fourth morning came wrapped in silence. Not even the wind dared to speak. Claire had stopped counting hours. The snow no longer melted on her shoulders. It simply stayed, like it belonged there. Her mind floated somewhere between exhaustion and surrender when she heard it. Small boots crunching in the snow, quick and light. A little girl came running across the platform, maybe 5 years old, with chestnut braids flapping beneath a woolen bonnet. Her cheeks were pink with cold, her coat too big for her tiny frame. But her eyes? Those eyes burned with something fierce. Purpose. Hope. Behind her, a tall man followed, half jogging, clearly trying to catch up. He wore a heavy coat, dusted in frost, a worn Stetson pulled low over his brow. His face was weathered, jaw tight, boots caked with dirt from some back trail. Claire blinked. The child stopped right in front of her and pointed with delight. "That's her. That's the one I told you about." The man looked confused. "Mara? What are you—" The girl turned to him, tugging his arm with all the strength her little body could summon. "Daddy, that's her. Can she be my mama now?" The platform went still. Claire sat frozen, unsure if she was hallucinating. The man removed his hat, stepped closer, eyes narrowing as he studied her face. There was no recognition in them, no guilt, just confusion, followed by dawning concern. "Ma'am," he began slowly, "forgive me, but do I know you?" Claire opened her mouth, then closed it. Her throat was raw from cold and heartbreak. I'm your mail-order bride," she finally whispered. "Claire Evans. I arrived 3 days ago. I got your letter." He shook his head, lips parting. "I never wrote any letter." A silence, heavier than snowfall, fell between them. The little girl looked back and forth, confused, her expression crumbling. "You said she'd come," she whispered. "I said no such—" The man stopped, suddenly remembering something. His face paled slightly. "Wait." He crouched next to his daughter. "Mara, sweetheart, did you send a letter?" She nodded, small hands wringing her coat sleeves. "I asked Mrs. Dallow to write it for me. I told her what to say. I put the picture in it, too." He closed his eyes, exhaling hard. Claire sat motionless. Her whole body stung, but it was her pride that hurt most. So, this was it. Not abandonment. Just a child's wish. A cruel mistake. Or maybe a desperate hope answered. The man looked at Claire again, regret softening his jaw. I'm Eli Matthews. My wife died 2 years ago. It's just been me and Mara since. I never intended—" He gestured helplessly. "I'm sorry." Claire stood, slow and shaking, snow falling off her lap. "I sat here for 3 days," she said quietly. "I thought I was forgotten, that I'd been thrown away." "You weren't," he said, almost instinctively, then realized how hollow that sounded. "I was," she replied, "even if it wasn't your doing." Mara's voice cracked like glass. "I just wanted a mama." Claire looked at her. The child's eyes, so like her own once, held back tears. "I didn't mean to trick you," the girl whispered. I didn't want to be the only one in town without a mama." Claire's lips trembled. For a moment the cold didn't matter. Neither did the letter. She knelt down in front of Mara, brushing a braid off her cheek. "I'm not mad at you," she said. "You were brave to ask for what you needed." Then she stood and faced Eli. "I have nowhere else to go," she said evenly. "No family, no home. I came here with nothing but a promise and a suitcase." Eli hesitated, then nodded. "We can offer you a roof, a warm place. Nothing more for now." Claire's chin lifted. "That's more than I've had in a long time." He reached for her suitcase. She didn't stop him. Together they walked off the platform, the three of them. And though none of them said it, none of them understood it yet. Something had already begun. The cabin sat on the edge of a ridge, half swallowed by pine and snow. It wasn't large, 2 rooms and a lean-to shed out back, but the cold seeped into the corners as if the place had long forgotten how to hold warmth. Claire stood just inside the door, her boots dripping, arms folded against her chest. The silence pressed in from the wooden walls like another weight she had to carry. Eli's didn't say much. He showed her where she could sleep, on a narrow cot in the main room, near the stove, and then he retreated to the room he shared with his daughter. No offer of tea, no fire lit. Just a nod and a heavy door closing behind him. Mara lingered near Claire, eyes round and unblinking. "Do you know how to make apple pie?" the girl asked softly. Claire smiled faintly. "No apples." "Oh," the girl said, disappointed. Then, after a beat, "Mama used to put cinnamon on the crust. I remember that." Claire crouched down. "Do you miss her?" Mara nodded. "But sometimes I forget what her voice sounded like. And that makes me feel bad." Claire brushed a loose strand of hair from the child's forehead. "That just means you're growing, not forgetting." The stove creaked behind them. The room felt colder than the snow outside. Over the next 2 days they fell into a rhythm, one not quite of family, but of tolerable cohabitation. Claire rose early, built the fire, fetched water and boiled oats. She swept the floor and mended what she could. When Mara caught a chill and began coughing at night, Claire stayed up with her, pressing cool cloths to her forehead, whispering lullabies she hadn't sung since her own mother died. "It was my toe." He said nothing. He came and went, splitting wood or tending the barn. Sometimes he'd pause in the doorway, watching them from a distance, the stranger at his hearth caring for his child as if she belonged there. But the space between him and Claire stayed thick. Heavy, she could feel it. In every look he didn't give her, every sentence that ended too soon. One morning after a cold rain, Claire stood outside trying to shake out the quilts. A sudden drip from above soaked her shoulder. She looked up. The roof was leaking. Later that afternoon, while she was boiling soup, she heard hammering overhead. She stepped outside and found Eli on the ladder, patching the roof with care. "You don't have to do that now," she said. He didn't look down. "I should have done it before." That was all he said. That night, she found something new on the table, a framed sketch of a woman, gentle face, hair tied back, the same eyes as Mara Claire. Picked it up gently, running her fingers along the edge. "She's beautiful," she said. Eli stood in the shadows near the door. "Mara always asks why we don't keep her picture out. I just didn't know where to put it." Claire didn't respond. She simply set the frame in the center of the table, next to the candle. It stayed there after that. Despite the distance, there were moments, small ones, that began to stir something soft between the lines. When Claire burned her hand on the stove, Eli brought her a poultice without being asked. When he returned late one night and found her asleep upright in the chair beside Mara's bed, he carried her to the cot and covered her with his coat. Either spoke of it, but Mara noticed. "I think he likes you," she whispered one morning as Claire braided her hair. Claire paused, hands still. "He's just being kind," she said. Mara tilted her head. He never used to smile at breakfast. Claire looked away, a strange ache swelling in her chest. The cabin was still cold, but the silence was beginning to crack. The fire crackled low, casting flickering shadows across the cabin walls. Outside, the wind howled like something lost in the dark, but inside, the quiet was deeper. His heart was pounding. There was no pulse that could beat in this. Claire sat at the edge of the hearth, sewing a tear in Mara's sleeve. The little girl had gone to bed early, her fever fading, breath soft and steady behind the door. Eli stood near the table, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the flames. He had been pacing for nearly an hour before finally speaking. "Claire." She didn't look up. He cleared his throat, stepped closer, the floor creaking beneath his boots. "I owe you an apology." Still, she sewed. "I should have spoken sooner. I should have handled things differently." Claire's hands slowed, the needle pausing mid-stitch. "I was shocked. That day at the station," Eli continued, "I wasn't expecting anyone. much less a woman who'd given up everything for a promise she thought was real. She glanced at him now, eyes cool and waiting. He rubbed the back of his neck, the words thick. I didn't write that letter, but that doesn't mean I had no part in what happened. Mara's lonely. She misses her mother. I should have seen what she was trying to do. Claire returned to her sewing. And you? He looked down. I've been alone a long time. I stopped believing in things like love, like marriage. At least, the kind that starts with paper and hope. Claire said nothing. Eli sat down across from her, voice softer now. I've seen too many couples fall apart. People think love just happens, but if it doesn't grow from something true, it won't last. He hesitated, watching her closely. I didn't want to make you stay because I felt obligated, and I didn't want you to think you had to earn your place here. Claire's needle paused again. Her hands trembled slightly. I'm trying to say, Eli continued, that maybe we could give it time. Maybe you could stay and we could... No. The word was sharp, cutting through the room like broken glass. Claire looked up now, eyes blazing. You think I want to force something? That I'm here waiting for a man to decide if I'm worthy of kindness? That's not what I came here because I believed there might be something better than what I had, not because I needed rescuing. I've done more fighting for my own life than you can imagine. I didn't mean... You don't have to mean it, she said, rising. You just have to say it the wrong way. Eli stood too, hands raised. Claire, Ham's appearance, she was already turning away. I won't stay where I'm only tolerated, where I'm just a mistake someone's trying to feel less guilty about. Please, just listen. I have, she snapped. And now, I'm done. That night, after the house had gone still, Claire packed her few belongings. She moved quietly, careful not to wake the child. She left her dress, the nicer one she had brought for Sundays, hanging in the corner. No need for it now. On Mara's nightstand she placed the small rag doll she had stitched from scraps, a gift she had meant to give on the girl's birthday. Beside it, a folded note, in delicate handwriting. I'm not your mama. Just someone who got off at the wrong stop. Claire didn't cry. Not when she closed the door. Not when she stepped out into the snow. Not when her footprints disappeared behind her. The wind was sharp, the night cruel, but she walked into it anyway. The snow had thickened to a silent white wall, erasing roads, trees, and memories. Claire stumbled forward, arms hugging herself, breath coming in ragged clouds that barely reached the air. Her boots were soaked through. Her coat, too thin for a Wyoming storm, clung to her like wet parchment. Every gust of wind cut sharper than the last. She did not know where she was going, only that she had to keep going. Anywhere but that cabin. Anywhere but where her heart had been mistaken for a debt to be repaid. She found shelter in a storage shed behind an abandoned barn, half collapsed, the door creaking on rusted hinges. Inside, it was colder than death and just as still. She curled into a corner, arms tucked tight, teeth chattering uncontrollably. She thought of her mother then, of the quilt they used to share, of how her mother's hands always smelled like lavender, even in winter, and how, once, she said, "When you love someone, you don't have to say it right. You just have to show up." Claire's eyelids drooped. Her fingers no longer felt like fingers. The snow whispered through cracks in the wall, singing lullabies only the lost could hear. And then, everything went black. Back at the cabin, Eli stared at the note. He read it once, then again, and then he saw the doll, his chest constricted, not just with guilt, but something deeper, fear, realization, loss. He turned to the coat rack and froze. Her scarf was missing. He stepped outside. Her footprints were faint in the snow, already filling in with drifts. "Claire!" he called into the wind. "Claire!" No answer. He didn't hesitate. Ellie saddled the mule, his horse long since lamed by ice, and wrapped himself in furs. The storm raged, but he rode into it with nothing but a lantern and a name. He followed the trail until it vanished. Then he followed instinct. He found her, just before dawn. Through the snow-dimmed light, the shed looked like a tomb. He forced the door open, heart pounding, and there she was, curled like a child, lips blue, hands curled into fists, eyes barely open. "Claire," he breathed, kneeling beside her. She didn't speak. Her lashes fluttered. Her skin was ice. He unwrapped his coat, pulled her into him, wrapped her tight. His hands moved fast, rubbing warmth into her arms, her back, whispering her name over and over. "Ah." "You hear me?" he said, voice breaking. "You do not get to leave like this. You do not get to freeze out here alone." She stirred faintly. A tear slipped from the corner of her eye. He pressed his forehead to hers. "I was wrong," he whispered, "about everything." And then louder, firmer, like a vow, "Come home with me." The road back was slow, cruel. Eli held her in front of him, arms locked tight around her shivering frame, his coat draped over both of them. The mule trudged through snow that rose nearly to its chest. Claire leaned against him, too weak to speak. But she heard him. Every time he murmured her name, every time he asked her to hold on, every time he said, "You are not a mistake." By the time the cabin came into view, the sky had begun to brighten, a pale gray tinged with pink. Inside, he laid her on the cot, lit the fire, boiled water, made tea. And when she opened her eyes again, hours later, he was still there, sitting beside her, one hand on her arm, the other clutching a steaming bowl. No grand speeches, no apologies, just presence, and something new in his eyes, something warmer than fire. Morning came like a whisper, soft light filtering through the frost-bitten window pane, stretching across the wooden floor in narrow beams. Claire stirred beneath the quilt, the scent of warmth pulling her back from the edge. She blinked slowly, eyes adjusting. The cabin was quiet but not empty. The fire still crackled, a kettle hissed gently from the stove. Beside her on the nightstand sat a bowl of porridge. Steam rose from it in thin curls. Next to it, carefully folded, was a piece of paper. Claire sat up, the quilt still around her shoulders. Her limbs ached, but the cold no longer clawed at her. She reached for the note with trembling fingers. The handwriting was rough, unsure, like a man unaccustomed to writing what he felt. "Claire, I do not know how to say this without getting it wrong, so I'll just say it plain. I am sorry, not just for the cold or the silence, but for not believing what you brought with you. You didn't just arrive with a suitcase. You came with patience, with care, with the kind of strength I forgot existed in this world. Since you stepped into this house, it has not been the same. Mara laughs more, the rooms feel less hollow, the nights less long. She needs you, and if I am being honest, so do I. Not because I need someone to sew or cook, not because Mara wanted a mother, but because you are the first thing in a long time that feels like home. I don't know what love looks like anymore, but I think it might look a little like you, falling asleep by the fire, even after I failed you. Stay, if you can. Not for duty, not for pity, but maybe for something new we don't yet have a name for. Eli." Claire read the letter twice, then a third time, her hand still resting on the page, long after her eyes stopped moving. There was no proposal in it, no promise of forever, and yet it was more than any ring could offer. A man who had locked himself in grief had left the door open, just a little. A house that had felt like a cage now felt like a hearth. She looked at the bowl, still warm, still waiting. She didn't write him back, not with ink. Instead she stood, slow, deliberate, and walked to the stove. She poured water into the basin, washed her face, braided her hair. Then she moved about the kitchen quietly, finding flour, dried herbs, a few root vegetables in the bin. When Eli stepped through the door an hour later, carrying firewood, he froze. The table had been set. A small stew simmered in the pot. A plate of biscuits waited beside it. The air smelled of rosemary and ash, and something gentler, something like forgiveness. Claire didn't look up right away. She stirred the pot, then said softly, "I'm going to the market tomorrow. We're low on salt and lamp oil." Eli stood there, snow still melting on his shoulders, hands motionless at his sides. And then he nodded. That was all. No grand declarations, no names for what they were. But as their eyes met across the firelit kitchen, something passed between them, a mutual understanding, a silent vow. And somehow, that was enough. The cabin glowed with the soft amber hue of firelight and something gentler, something unspoken but thick in the air. Claire moved quietly through the kitchen, apron tied tight around her waist, sleeves rolled to her elbows. The stew simmered low, biscuits browned in the oven, and a pot of beans had been slow-cooked with herbs from the cupboard's back corner. It was not a feast, but it was a meal, a real one, the kind meant for more than surviving. She set the table with care, 3 plates, 3 cups, cloth napkins folded neatly beside each. A candle flickered in the center, its flame steady. In the corner of the room, Mara watched with wide eyes, her little hands resting beneath her chin, as if afraid to speak and break the moment. Claire smiled softly. "Would you like to help carry the bread?" The child nodded, hopping down and moving with careful precision, as if she knew, somehow, that tonight was special, not in a loud festive way, but in the way hearts realign when nothing is forced. Lee came in just before the sun vanished behind the pines. He stopped in the doorway, snow clinging to his boots, breath catching. The smell hit him first, rosemary, wood smoke, and something faintly sweet. Then the sight, a table not just set but cared for, a home, not just a shelter. Claire didn't look up at first. She was ladling stew into bowls. He stepped inside, set down his coat, cleared his throat once. "Claire," he began, voice gravel rough, something sitting heavy in his chest. But before he could say more, she looked up and said calmly, simply, "Tomorrow, I'll go to town to get a few things for the house." Eli blinked. His words died on his tongue. She returned to the stew as if she'd only mentioned needing flour or thread, but the silence that followed was full, rich, warm, undeniable. That one sentence said everything. Yes, she was staying. Yes, this was her home now. Yes, they were building something. They ate in quiet, but not the cold kind that had once lived between them. This quiet was comfortable. Shared. Eli passed her the salt without being asked. Claire poured him a second helping without needing to look. Mara hummed as she chewed, swinging her legs under the table. And when dinner was done, when the dishes had been washed and stacked, when the fire had been stoked for the night, the child tugged at Claire's skirt. "Can I call you something?" she asked. Claire knelt beside her. "Of course, sweetheart, what is it?" Mara hesitated, then leaned in close, voice barely above a whisper. The word hung there, trembling in the space between hope and permission. Claire's eyes stung. She looked over to Eli. He didn't speak. He didn't correct the child. He only nodded once, slow and sure. Claire turned back to Mara and pulled her into her arms. "You can call me that," she said, voice thick with something she hadn't felt in years. Mara smiled, nestled into her chest. The cabin was quiet again, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like the beginning of something whole. Spring had just begun to whisper through the pines. The snow was melting in soft patches, the ground no longer a grave of white, but a promise of green. Birds had returned to the trees, and for the first time in months, the cabin felt like it belonged to the land, rather than merely surviving it. Claire stood outside hanging linens, the wind brushing her cheek like an old friend. Inside, Mara was giggling as Eli tried, badly, to braid her hair. It felt like peace. And peace, as Claire knew too well, often arrived with a warning. They came just before sundown. 3 men on horseback, dust rising behind them like a storm cloud. They weren't dressed like cowhands. They weren't strangers passing through. They rode like they had business. Claire saw them from the hill and felt it in her gut. The way one of them dismounted before the horse stopped. The way the tallest one had a scar that ran from lip to jaw, she knew that face. He'd been there the night they smashed her father's windows. The night they told her she was worth more, sold than saved. He saw her now, and smiled. Leeli stepped out onto the porch, the moment they crossed the gate. "What's your business?" he asked flatly, shotgun resting by the doorway. The leader spat in the dirt. "We come for her." Claire stepped beside Eli, voice steady. "You're not taking me anywhere." The man tilted his head. "Debt don't vanish just 'cause you crossed a few mountains." "She paid it," Eli growled, "and then some." "This ain't about money," the man sneered. "It's about principle. You run, you owe. That's the way of the world." Eli didn't answer. He just raised the shotgun. The first shot rang out like thunder. One of the men went down screaming, clutching his leg. The second drew quick, fired. The bullet grazed Eli's arm. Claire screamed, ran to him as blood bloomed on his sleeve. He shoved her back. "Get inside." But she didn't run. Instead, she stepped in front of him. The third man raised his revolver, aimed square at Eli's chest, and Claire, without thinking, without hesitating, threw herself into the path. The world exploded. A hot pain burst through her side. The force knocked her down, but not out. She hit the dirt, gasping. Eli roared, firing again. By the time the dust cleared, the men were gone, two crawling, one galloping away with a shattered shoulder. Eli dropped beside her. "Claire, Claire, no, God, no." She blinked up at him, pale, lips trembling. "You're bleeding," she whispered. He laughed through the tears. "So are you." She smiled, weak but real. "Guess that makes us even?" The town doctor patched them both up. Claire's wound was deep but clean. The bullet had missed anything vital. Barely. For 3 days the town talked, and then it quieted. Something changed after that. The next time Claire walked into the mercantile, folks nodded instead of staring. Mrs. Holloway from the bakery slipped an extra loaf into her bag with a wink. Even old Mr. Jensen, who once muttered, "mail order mistake," under his breath, tipped his hat. No one questioned what she was anymore. She belonged. Not because of a license or a ring, but because she had chosen them and bled for them. They never held a wedding. No white dress. No preacher. Just one night, weeks later, by the fire, with Mara asleep in the corner, Claire looked up from kneading dough and said, "We're low on flour again. I'll fetch some next trip." Eli looked at her from his chair, one arm still in a sling. "Already making plans?" he teased. Claire shrugged. "Someone has to keep this place running." He smiled. She smiled back. Then they fell into silence,